Sixth grade, welcome to Chapter 2 in Science. I'll try something a little bit different with your videos. I tried to photocopy your book onto the screen, hopefully, so that you can see what I'm reading and it'll look more like what history does. If you're in your science book and you have it sitting there on your desk, table, wherever you're working, you can see that we're on page 25. We're going to get started with Chapter 2 and talking about cells. Chapter 1, remember, was classification. We took all living things, we broke them down into the 6 kingdoms. The bacteria, which had 2, eubacteria and archaeobacteria, protists, fungi, plants, and then animals. This chapter we're going to look at, if I think of a plant or an animal, the little cells that make that up. We'll spend most of our time talking just plants and animals, so we're going to get into this chapter talking about cells a little bit. If you turn the page, as we go into cells, you can see the vocabulary words that are there. Beautiful little picture of the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to get started on our skill. If you're bored at home and you want to do the science experiment on page 28, it's a lot of fun. You find a little safety pin so that you can put a drop of water in it, and that little water will sit in the eye of that safety pin there, and then you can use it as a magnifying glass. It'll make the E just slightly bigger, but what they want you to do is move the E up and down from the paper, and then you'll see how it gets larger, and then you'll eventually get to the point where if you have water in there and it works right, the E actually flips over because water bends light, and it'll bend the light enough that by the time it reaches your eye, it'll have flipped the image completely over. Okay, the point of the water drop lens is to simply teach you. We discovered how to make things bigger back in the day. That led to the invention of the microscope. Instead of using water, they bent glass to create the lenses that we need. And today they add mirrors to those things. Today we have a lot more powerful microscopes that we'll learn about in this chapter, but that was a little experiment. Today I'm going to focus on the skill. It's making inferences. We'll learn what making inferences is and how to do that today. And then we'll understand why we make inferences as we work through cells in the coming lessons. So I have your notes over on the right-hand page as we work our way through this. I'll get reading on page 29 here. It says, sometimes writers do not directly tell you everything they mean. So you got your first blank filled in. We do that all the time as writing. It makes you what we like to say, hey, read between the lines here, or make your guess. It's, as a reader, I sometimes like that because it builds anticipation, like my brain is going and trying to figure out what comes next. Sometimes that can be frustrating because you're like, just tell me so that I know that my thinking's the same as the author's, but sometimes the author leaves it wide open for us so that we can create our own. Continuing on, instead they hint at ideas, fill in your blank, by the way they write. When you make an inference, you use facts, number 3, you have read, to make a guess about what the writer is trying to say. Okay, so guys, number 1, you're using facts. Number 2, you're making a guess. We talk about this in history class, guys, when it comes to drawing conclusions. It kind of goes the same thing as making inferences. I'm going to use as many facts as I can so that my guess is logical. And there are a lot of times in history class as we go through these ancient civilizations, I'll stop and I'll say, hey guys, look what your history book said. They said this looks like, or this sounds like, or this makes sense. They're making an inference because we can't prove it. We don't have enough written records. But based on the facts that we do have, we go with that. Key points. Number 1, try to make an inference from facts that you read. In other words, the hidden message here, the inference they're making already is you know the difference between facts and opinions, and you know not to use opinions when it comes to making an inference. Number 2, use what you already know to help you make an inference. So that goes over here with number 4 as you fill in the blank here. I have to go back to prior knowledge, guys. That's why it's so important to continue to learn. We always want to attach it to prior knowledge. So this is what happened in the past. Therefore, it would make sense that I'm going to guess this, my inference, in the future based on what I learned in the past. 5 is the fill in the blank. It's going to come along with this article over here from Seeing Cell Parts. Okay, so here's what making inferences does. I look at the facts from the article and I use that to make an inference. The inference is, what's the question that I need to have answered? So it says this, in 1683, Anton von Leeuwenhoek used a simple light microscope to see very small cells, Later, in 1857, so hundreds some years later, scientists used more powerful microscopes to see the mitochondria of a cell. But it wasn't until after the invention of the electron microscope in 1931 that scientists were able to see the structure of some of the cell's smaller organelles, such as the endoplasmic reticulum. Why can parts of a cell that can't be seen with a light microscope be viewed with an electron microscope? So they give us up here all these facts. He starts to see these things. They start to make better ones. They can see the mitochondria, but we can't see everything until 1931 when we have an electron microscope. Now I'm over here trying to answer the question. Why can parts of the cell that can't be seen with a light microscope be viewed with an electron microscope? Well, guys, hopefully you are reading between the lines. It didn't tell me this, but obviously an electron microscope must be more powerful than a light microscope. That's why I'm able to see smaller organelles. And so they never told me that in this article, guys, but I can read between the lines and I can answer that question. So that's what making an inference is all about. I look at an article, I get my facts, and then I answer the question. Now you're going to try it. I have an article here in the middle of this page about diffusion. As you read this article, you're going to fill in the 3 facts that I pulled out of it. Now there's actually a few more facts, but I just gave you the key parts. And I'm hoping that you will use these 3 facts and prior knowledge, what you already know, to be able to answer the question, what has occurred in the cells of a plant to cause it to wilt? You're going to make your inference. You're making a guess. Now, guys, what you're doing is making your best guess. Some of your guesses might actually be wrong. But as long as you go back and base it on these facts, and you support your guess with the facts, that's what it is. We do that all the time. We look at our inferences we make, and we step back and we go, got that one wrong, but it's okay. I'll read the article with you. Try to fill in the facts as you go. The cell membrane controls the movement of substances into and out of a cell. Molecules of water are small enough that they can move freely in and out of the cell. They move by a process called diffusion. In this process, the cell works to make the amount of water relative to the amount of dissolved substances in it the same inside the cell as it is outside the cell. If you have observed a potted plant wilting on a sunny windowsill, you have seen this dramatic demonstration of trying to make things the same of the way this cellular process can affect a plant. Your job, hopefully you got those 3 filled in from my 3 sentences, is to answer this question. What has occurred in cells of a plant that causes it to wilt? So you're going down here now, and your assignment is to finish this little piece of paper question right here to answer what do you think is happening that is causing it to wilt. And just put your guess in 1 sentence in your own words. Okay. The other reason I like this skill, guys, is it has introduced us to a lot of things we're going to talk about in the next lessons, from these scientists here to the inventions to what diffusion is. So it kind of gives you an introduction to what's going on. Have a blessed day.